seen this before. Your baby is lying there peacefully, maybe on the changing table, maybe in the crib, maybe right in your lap. And then suddenly, the legs start going. Kick, kick, kick. No crying, no obvious reason, no clear trigger. Just non-stop movement, like your baby is trying to run somewhere without actually going anywhere. And at that moment, almost every parent has the same quiet question. What are they doing? Because when babies kick for no reason, it can feel strangely mysterious. If they were crying, you could assume discomfort. If they were smiling, you could call it excitement. But when they're just staring into space and kicking like crazy, it feels harder to read. Some parents laugh it off. Some worry. Some start checking for gas, overstimulation, hunger, temperature, or discomfort. And sometimes, none of those answers seem to fit. But here's the surprising truth. What looks random on the outside is often not random at all. Those tiny kicks may be part of something much deeper than most parents realize. Not a bad habit, not meaningless noise from the body, not wasted energy. In many cases, your baby may be doing one of the most important jobs of early development, learning how their own body works. That means what looks like nothing may actually be a moment of intense internal learning. Your baby may be exploring movement, building coordination, collecting sensory information, and teaching the brain where the body begins and what it can do. So if you've ever looked at your baby's kicking and thought, there has to be more going on here, you were right. Because once you understand what babies are really doing when they kick for no reason, you stop seeing random motion. You start seeing the earliest blueprint of control, awareness, and discovery. And the first step is understanding why the usual explanation parents hear is only half the story.
Most people explain baby kicking in a very simple way. They say babies kick because they have energy, because they're uncomfortable, because they're gassy, or because that's just what babies do. And sometimes, yes, those explanations can be partly true. A baby who feels uncomfortable may move more. A baby who gets excited may wave arms and legs. A startled baby may suddenly fling the whole body outward. But the reason this common explanation is incomplete is because it treats every kick like it has to mean one immediate thing. And babies don't work like that. In early infancy, movement is not always a clear message with one clean translation. Babies are still developing control over their muscles, their reflexes, and their nervous system. So some of what you see is emotional, some is physical, some is reflexive, and some of it is developmental practice happening in real time. That's a huge difference. Because if every kick is seen as a sign of a problem, parents can become anxious very quickly. But if every kick is dismissed as meaningless, something important gets missed too. The truth usually lives in the middle. Many baby movements are not emergencies, but they are not empty either. In the first months, your baby's body is still moving ahead of full intention. Movements can be jerky, sudden, repetitive, or intense simply because the brain and body are still learning to work together. What looks disorganized to an adult may actually be normal early development. So instead of asking, what problem is this movement trying to tell me about? It can be much more useful to ask, what kind of learning could this movement be helping with? That shift changes everything. Because once you stop treating kicking like meaningless motion or instant distress, you can start seeing it as one of the earliest ways babies explore themselves and the world around them. And that's where science becomes far more fascinating than most parents expect.
In the first weeks and months of life, babies do not have smooth, polished control over their bodies. Their nervous system is still immature, and that's why newborn movements often look jerky, sudden, and a little chaotic. Over time, these motions usually become more fluid, more coordinated, and more purposeful. And kicking plays a major role in that transition. Why? Because movement is one of the brain's first teachers. When your baby kicks, they're not just moving a leg, they're creating a loop of information. The leg moves, the muscles activate, the joints shift, the skin feels contact, the body changes position and the brain receives feedback. That feedback helps the baby slowly understand something they were not born fully knowing, where their body is and what it can do. In other words, movement is not just output, it is input too. Every kick can teach the brain about force, resistance, timing, and position. When a baby presses against a mattress, pushes against your chest, brushes the air, or feels the diaper tighten with motion, that's information. And in early infancy, that information matters a lot. This is one reason babies often seem to repeat movements again and again. Adults see repetition and assume nothing new is happening. But for a baby, repetition is one of the fastest ways to build a map between action and sensation. It helps the nervous system connect motion with consequence. And the legs are especially interesting because babies often use them strongly very early. Before hands become skillful, before reaching becomes deliberate, the legs are already kicking, pushing, stretching, and rehearsing patterns that later support bigger physical control. So when your baby kicks during a calm moment, an alert moment, or a seemingly empty moment, there is a good chance the body is not just burning off energy. It may be practicing how movement feels. And once researchers started looking at these spontaneous movements more closely, they found something even more amazing. Those random-looking kicks may actually help babies build a sense of themselves from the inside out.
Some of the most compelling infant research suggests that spontaneous movement helps the brain organize a kind of internal body map. That idea sounds complicated, but it's actually simple. Your baby is not born with a fully finished understanding of their own body. They have to build it. And one of the ways they do that is by moving. When babies kick, wiggle, stretch, and make spontaneous limb movements, the brain receives sensory feedback tied to those actions. That helps connect movement to feeling, feeling to location, location to body awareness. Over time, this helps the baby learn, this is my leg, this is how it moves, this is what it feels like when it pushes, bends, or hits a surface. Researchers studying newborns have found that spontaneous limb movements are linked to brain activity in areas involved in processing sensation. Other developmental research suggests that babies don't learn movement only through repeating one perfect action. They also learn through variation, through wandering, through trying many slightly different patterns. And that may be why baby kicking often looks so unpredictable. To adults, it can seem aimless. One leg, then both, then a pause, then faster, then slower. But from a developmental point of view, that variety may be exactly what makes it useful. Your baby may be exploring many combinations of motion and sensation, gathering data the brain can later organize into smoother and more controlled movement. It's like the body is running tiny experiments all day. What happens if I push harder? What happens if both legs move together? What happens if my foot touches this surface? What happens if this motion shifts my whole body? Of course, babies are not asking those questions in words, but their nervous system may be learning through the answers anyway. And this is the deeper twist most people never realize. Purposeful movement often begins with spontaneous movement. Before babies can deliberately use the body, they first have to discover the body. So the random kick is not the opposite of meaningful movement. Very often, it is the beginning of meaningful movement. Which means these strange little bursts are not just developmental background noise. They can tell us something beautiful about what babies are doing all day long, becoming more connected to themselves. Once you see kicking this way, it can be incredibly reassuring, because suddenly your baby doesn't look like a mystery you're constantly failing to decode. They look like a tiny human doing serious developmental work in a language without words. Sometimes kicking may come with excitement, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with alertness, sometimes with discomfort. But often it is also part of how babies regulate sensation, explore movement, and organize their growing nervous system. It can happen during play, during quiet moments, during transitions, and even when nothing dramatic seems to be happening at all. That means not every intense burst of leg movement needs to be treated like a warning sign. But there is one careful caution here, and it matters. Parents should focus less on one isolated movement
and more on patterns over time. If your baby seems to stop using one side, seems consistently much weaker on one side, appears unusually floppy, has repeated movements that feel more like shaking than normal kicking, or seems distressed in a way that feels persistent and hard to soothe, that's worth discussing with your pediatrician. Not because every unusual movement is dangerous, most are not, but because patterns tell a bigger story than a single moment ever can. And that balance is important. You do not need to panic every time your baby kicks wildly for no reason. You also don't need to ignore your instincts if something consistently feels off. Calm observation is usually more useful than fear. So if your baby is otherwise feeding, responding, moving both sides, and growing in their usual way, those random kicks are far more likely to be part of normal baby behavior than a sign of something wrong. And when you really let that sink in, the whole meaning of those movements changes. Because the final shift is not just scientific, it's emotional too.
The next time your baby kicks for no obvious reason, try looking at it differently. Instead of seeing random motion, see discovery. Instead of seeing chaos, see practice. Instead of seeing nothing, see a brain and body teaching each other how to work together. Those little legs may be doing much more than you think. They may be helping your baby build awareness, coordination, sensory understanding, and the earliest foundations of control. What looks small to you may feel enormous to them. What looks ordinary may actually be one of the quiet miracles of infancy. And maybe that's the most comforting part of all. You do not have to decode every kick perfectly to be a good parent. You do not have to explain every strange little movement in real time. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply knowing that your baby is not just lying there doing nothing. They are growing, learning, and organizing themselves in ways that are mostly invisible from the outside. So if you've ever worried that these movements meant something was wrong, let this be your reminder. Very often, they mean your baby is doing exactly what babies are designed to do. They are learning their body before they can talk about it. They are exploring movement before they can control it. They are building understanding before they can show you the final result. And if this changes the way you see your baby's random kicking, stay close, because there are so many other baby behaviors that look simple on the surface but are much deeper underneath.